Good afternoon, and to some of you already good evening to this anchor session 4 of the GEO Week, Resilient Cities and Human Settlements. And there's some background noise. Can you please stop that? Thank you. Welcome again to this session that follows nicely the previous session, the plenary that was introducing this new engagement priority of GEO on resilient cities and human settlements. And with this session here, we are trying to dive a bit more into it and try to fill it with more life. Unfortunately, we were unable to follow the end of the previous sessions in preparations of this one, so we couldn't even see the end of the nice presentation given by our colleagues from Greece, who were already setting nicely the scenes of what are the urban issues. But I think with the panel that we have gathered here, we are also in a good position to recover that and bring this up to speed and really try to fill this resilient cities, human settlements engagement priority of GEO with some life and some discussion. Let me move to a short introduction on the next slide. Yes, a quick introduction of myself. I'm Thomas Kemper. I'm a scientific officer at the European Commission Joint Research Center in Northern Italy, and I'm working in the disaster risk management unit, and I'm leading the global human settlement layer project that is also providing relevant information for this topic because we provide global maps of built-up areas and population. If you go to the next slide, please. I would like to quickly present to you also the panelists that are joining us today. It's a very nice mix of people from different institutions, different angles that are growing to shed lights on what currently can be done in the context of resilient cities and human settlements. Let me start with introducing Her Excellence Thuraya Al-Hashimi from the United Arab Emirates. If you can go back to the panelists, please. Yes, thank you. Then we have Graham Alabaster from the Geneva office of United Nations Settlement Program. We have Shushanek Asmarayan from SENS in Armenia. We have Cascade Tucholsky from CIASIN at Columbia University, and Nazmul Hook from ICLEI World Secretariat in Bonn. During their presentations, they can maybe spend a few more words on introducing themselves, but I just wanted to give you a quick overview of the panelists already now. Next slide, please. Yeah, a quick overview and outlook on what is going to happen during this session. So you have seen in the previous plenary that we have now this fourth engagement priority on urban resilience and resilient cities and human settlements. And this is, of course, very, very important. It's really showing the importance of urban areas that are coming up. There's already a lot of activities going on in the GEO work program now, but we felt that we need to have a stronger emphasis on the role of cities and settlements in GEO, hence this new activities. And what we really try to achieve here is to invite the stakeholders in GEO to support the urban resilience engagement plan and work with cities and human settlements as appropriate. Next slide. During this 1 hour 50, now already a bit less, we have structured in a way that we will have a short set of presentation from the panelists that will present their work in this domain, and we will have then a panel discussion and question and answers also from the audience. So please, if you have questions to the panelists or comments, feel free to use the chat functionality of the Airmeet platform so that we can pick it up and try to address it at a later stage. Without further ado, I think we can move to the presentations. And I would like to, the next slide, would like to invite Graham Alabaster to give us an overview of UN Habitat's view on urban resilience here, because they are the ones that were asking GEO at the end to have this force engagement priority. So Graham, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much indeed, Thomas. I'm delighted to be with you all, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. I'm the head of Habitat's Geneva office, but I'm a long timer with Habitat. I've looked after many portfolios in that time, including slum upgrading, but I'm a public health engineer by profession, and I've worked in previously positions very closely with GEO, so I know of the immense capability you have. But today, if we could have the next slide, please, I'm just going to give a brief overview of Habitat's work on cities and what we're doing and where the synergies are with the GEO program. And of course, we want to build on already an existing program of work that we've been doing for some time. Could we have the next slide, please? So, I mean, I think it's probably clear to many of you, but as the world urbanizes at this fantastic rate, often below the radar and below people knowing what's happening, you know, urban areas are home to, well over half of the urban population, which of course is increasing. And we know by 2050, this is going to be up around 70%. But also, of course, they're responsible for the large proportion, 4/5 of the global GDP. So there's an immense need to understand cities better and to work ways to make them more resilient. Because if cities become dormant and they lose out, we're going to see an effect on the global economy very straightforwardly. And of course, quite naturally, cities are responsible for a large proportion, a very large proportion of the global energy consumption, for 75%. They produce a large proportion of the greenhouse gas emissions, but they're also responsible for large proportions of waste. So really, together, you know, this is the reason why urban centres need more of a focus, and why we need to work with local authorities and city governments, as well as national governments, to understand exactly what's happening in cities. Because there are many leaders around the world who still don't completely understand the way urbanization is going ahead. And of course, this varies very much depending on where you go in the world and between the different continents. But really, a lot of the urbanization that we're seeing, for example, in Africa, is going ahead in the smaller urban centers. So while the megacities are still continuing to produce wealth and contribute to greenhouse gas emissions, there's an explosive urbanization in smaller urban centers around the world. And those are the ones that we can actually make a difference in. In fact, many of those urban areas that we're talking about are yet to be built. So we are in a unique position now to understand how we can influence the development of those cities and track how the urbanization process can go forward in an efficient and safe way. Could we have the next slide, please? So looking at the sorts of challenges we're facing in urban centres as we move forward, of course, one of the biggest issues is the inequity and the informal settlements and slums that are currently very high levels in many parts of the world. And in fact, even in the more developed economies, there are still groups of the population in the cities who are not accessing services or have access to employment in the same way that the more wealthy parts of the city. And this is a huge example. For example, in sub-Saharan Africa, 60% of the urban population live in low income settings. So this is having a huge impact, not only on issues like access to services, health, but also how we deliver basic services, how we improve and make sure that the livelihoods of these people are looked after. Of course, as well, with industrialization and increases in access to personal transport, the issue of air quality is also worrying. And of course, many European cities are at huge risk from the health impacts of poor air quality. We've also seen, of course, due to conflict and some natural causes, that the issue of disasters and of their effects really disproportionately impact on both people and infrastructure in urban areas. This, of course, has a knock-on effect to food security, and now coupled with climate change, this is meaning that cities and urban areas are expanding into productive land in rural areas. So understanding how this works is really, really important. Could I have the next slide, please? So, of course, Habitat, the way we deal with this, of course, Habitat was involved as the custodian agency, if you like, of human settlements and sustainable urbanization. And back in 2016, the New Urban Agenda was developed, which is really a blueprint of how cities should move forward and towns should move forward in sustainable urbanization. And in response to that, Habitat's strategic plan addresses, through its variety of programs, both normative work and operational projects, 4 key areas. The first being the critical issue of prosperity and ensuring that cities and regions, that we reduce the impact of inequities in social areas, and we ensure that the prosperity of cities is produced. The second area is in the area of crisis prevention. One of the reasons why this is so important is that we have seen the general trends in urbanization exacerbated by the effects of migration, refugees and IDPs moving into urban areas to seek security in places of conflict and natural disasters. So we really need, one of our focus key areas program has been to look at this crisis management and to see how we can respond better. Of course, it goes without saying about the climate action and how the improving the urban environment, promoting nature-based solutions and other such things, and can address both mitigation and adaptation components of climate change management. And perhaps most importantly, and for this group, the idea of better understanding of the spatial inequalities that exist and the poverty that exists across the urban-rural continuum. So our strategic plan addresses all these areas. For more details, please feel free to contact us or to check on our website, which will give you a better idea of what's going on. I'd like to turn my attention now a little bit, if I could have the next slide, please, to the SDGs and the synergy, if you like, between the Sustainable Development Goal for cities, Goal 11, and the New Urban Agenda, which I mentioned is the blueprint for cities. There are several key elements of the SDGs which really we are working on very closely to address. And in fact, in many cases, because we're responsible for monitoring of SDG 11, we've had to develop new and interesting methodologies to support the tracking of these changing indicators in the urban space. Of course, the spatial arrangements of urban space is very important. Access to things, basic services, but more importantly, public transport. One very, very important area is the access to open space. And this, although may not appear apparent, is an incredibly important indicator of the way how urbanization is progressing. This was felt, just to give you a side anecdote, that during the COVID crisis, when many of the most disadvantaged were unable to go to work because they were unable to work from home, they have to go to their place of work. There was a demand from the more vulnerable communities to have access to more open public spaces so they could continue with their livelihood activities. So that's probably a good example of why understanding the spatial arrangements in cities are so important. Of course, I've mentioned already the inequity ideas, but such things as mapping the inequities of access to basic services like water, sanitation, and healthcare are very important. The tools, of course, that we're also developing one area that Habitat works on quite a lot is estimating, mapping the effects post a disaster. It's absolutely critical when there's been a disaster or some description that there's rapid assessment methodologies available to understand the best way to get over the disaster and to ensure that we build back better and bring in some of the newer concepts that we're talking about in urban design. And of course, the issue of tracking the changes of green areas. As we know, cities are expanding, as I said, in this rather inefficient urbanization in many urban areas, and we really do need tools to be able to track that very closely. Can I have the next slide, please? So, of course, UN Habitat and GEO have been collaborating for many years. And, for example, the Earth Observation Toolkit for Sustainable Cities and Communities, this is a joint initiative of GEO and Extended Operation for the SDGs. And this is just one outcome of our sort of continued engagement that's having a direct impact on monitoring open space around the world. So we also see huge opportunities to develop further the ideas around future opportunities for urban resilience, and we very much welcome to move the partnership forward with GEO and the rest of you to understand better how we can address these problems. Can I have the next slide, please? So, I mean, I think that's all I would say. Just a very brief overview to the work. We very much value our relationship with the GEO community, and I think together we have a strong opportunity to develop new tools and approaches, particularly in this resilient space. So, on that note, thank you everyone for your attention, and look forward to the rest of the session. Back to you, Thomas.
Thank you, Graham. Unfortunately, you will not be with us for the full duration of this session, so maybe I'll take now the opportunity to ask some clarification from you, because this new engagement plan is very closely linked to the new urban agenda. So the new urban agenda is sort of the overarching policy reference for this new priority. And I think not everybody here is well aware of the new urban agenda. So maybe you could clarify a bit, what is the difference between the new urban agenda compared to the SDGs? Do we have to do new reporting? There's also this 4-year reporting time frame mentioned. So maybe you can elaborate shortly on that.
Okay, thanks, Thomas. I mean, basically, of course, the new urban agenda, and the SDGs there's a huge synergy between the two. I mean, the difference between the two, if you like, is that the new urban agenda puts cities at the focus. And the reason it does that is because it sees cities in many cases as the instigator, the drivers, if you like, of change. So the lens, if you like, of the new urban agenda is it puts cities at the center and sees how both looking up to national government, how they can work better and improve relations and communications with national government ministries, and also to look at the communities and how we can engage much better with communities. As many of you already know, the key to making cities work efficiently is to understanding the landscape of the communities at city level. There's many things that are held back because of the inability to understand this idea of cities having their identity and being at the center of urbanization and development. And if we can, the new urban agenda is a way to look at that in a slightly different lens. So it's a very good opportunity. It doesn't it doesn't entail too much of an additional reporting burden, but it's actually a very good opportunity to understand why it's important that we give attention to cities and urban spaces. Perhaps one example I can give you, a concrete example. Let's take the health sector, for example. For a very long time now, of course, we benefit from ministries of health in countries who, by and large, have the say in the sorts of resources that go into health. But we're seeing, and it's come out very clearly in the pandemic, that cities and city governments can play a key role in managing and responding. The cities are more nimble. They have structures which enable multi-sectoral process to work more easily. So in many respects, much of the work that traditionally would be done by a line ministry, the Ministry of Health, is delegated to other areas. So if you like the new urban agenda, if you go into the new urban agenda, you'll find there's a part in there about health, which will explain how these ideas can be brought forward. The New Urban Agenda is a framework. It's obviously not a guideline, it's a framework. And the idea is that, local authorities will take and adapt that idea in the principles of the New Urban Agenda to fit into their existing legislation system. So it's actually, it's a good way to help to understand how urban areas at the centre can play a key role and how sustainable urbanisation can be achieved.
Okay, thank you, Graham. One follow-up question also, maybe again from the perspective of GEO. Is there any explicit reference to Earth observation or more general geospatial information as means to monitor progress?
Absolutely, and I mean, as you know, Habitat's the custodian agency for SDG 11, so we're responsible for providing advice to the member states and governments about how to monitor, the SDG 11, and in fact other SDGs. So there are many references to the use of GEO and Earth observation tools to aid that. And I mean, because of the huge importance of understanding the spatial arrangements in cities, we can't do it without the support and ideas of GEO. So yes, it's very much embedded into the ideas and the approaches of the New Urban Agenda.
Okay. Thank you. Maybe if the other panelists have a quick question to Graham, otherwise we move ahead to the next presentation. Okay, Graham, of course, you're welcome to stay as long as you can. Would be a pleasure to continue discussing with you also later. But let's move now from the global UN perspective to the country perspective from the point of view of the United Arab Emirates, where we have the pleasure of Her Excellence Turaya to be with us. She's with the Federal Competitiveness and Statistics Center of the UAE. And I leave the floor to you now.
Thank you, Thomas. Good morning and good afternoon for the people around the world. It's my pleasure to be here and to take you through an overview of what we do in geospatial in the United Arab Emirates. If we can move to the next slide, please. Okay. So the success of SDG implementation depends on various aspects, but partnership becomes at the core. The UAE has established multiple avenues of partnership to accelerate the implementation of SDG, both at a national and international level. At a national level, our governance structure includes national committees of SDG, an advisory board of youth, and we have a bridge of communication between the different sectors. Furthermore, we work with academia and we engage the civil society through innovative projects. However, international relations are as important to us as other nations. The UAE work with multiple international organizations to implement the SDG successfully. For the purpose of time, I can elaborate on three of them for now. The first one would be the UN DISA, which provides guideline and support and the host to centralize our open SDG data hub, of which the UAE forms part. The hub aims to track, report, monitor, and progress toward the SDG indicators. Second would be the Earth observation of SDG and the Committee of the Earth Observation Toolkit, which my friend has also elaborated on the importance of a toolkit just before my presentation. So for sustainable cities and human settlements, the whole goal is to develop and assess the geospatial methodologies, the toolkits, the data techniques to monitor how does the SDG use different Earth observation products to publish them in one portal which is being launched. Third but not least is the ISRI partnership, which saw the establishment of the UAE SDG Data Hub. The features multiplies best practices, data stories, and open data at the Emirates level and initiative within the UAE. It's inclusive of private sector and charitable organizations. If we can move to the next slide, please. Okay. So we started our partnership with utilization of geospatial information in SDG by studying the handbook issued by the UN GGIM and geospatial handbooks about the Earth observation and the geospatial information in support of monitoring and achieving the 2030 agenda. On the right side of the slide, you can see the metric that was a quick guide for us on which SDG indicator can be directly measured or supported by geospatial data and tools. And then if we go to the next slide, please. Okay, taking an example, we will take the environment example for now. Our physical world in which humans are living and being served the wide range of services, environment. The environment is changing and the economical activities are taking place. So geospatial information is simply the digital version of our world. That influence our understanding of the world that we live. And by combining and overlaying these different data sets, we provide an answer to the question in different and various fields. When geospatial information is associated with statistical information and their relationship to the different features, it simply intellectuates and helps us connect things, understand phenomena leads, and better manage the nature of the artificial assets. As well, we get effective resources allocation. So the geospatial journey started with compiling the foundation maps while ensuring there is an update for the national harmonization across. So this enables us to feed the production for the national statistic and comply it with the SDG. To the next slide, please. So in this slide, what we're trying to say is that our GIS SDG complies a journey where we rely on various data sets, including national admin data, national population grids, multiple municipality geospatial databases, and global open data sets. Free Landsat and essential emergency and local, like KhalifaSat imagery, we have used it in this. We see a wealth of data and GIS analytical capabilities. We can have a better addressing for SDG. One example is how we develop our national population using the number of geospatial data sets, like water electricity meters. How do we use that to reflect better understanding? It helps us identify the locations, the activity of the household, and description of the residential units. Another thing, it's building the land use that's set by the municipalities and the energy infrastructure. So it's all ways to find and understand what are these units saying to us? How can we reflect them better in our geospatial information? We also take the satellite imagery, where we extract and build up areas to make sure that they are assessed in the population distribution. And then the population estimate maps from the local statistical, we find administrative boundaries for them. So combining all this in the geospatial platform can give us different figure and better understanding how can the leadership or the decision maker have based information used for the geospatial things. Moving to the next slide, please. Okay. So for in this slide, you'll see our Earth observation. We value the Earth observation data in the sustainable spectral place, temporal coverage as a fraction of the cost of traditional method. Of course, we always look at what is the costly things and how can we work better towards digitalization. So we did a study at FCSC to extract the building print from the satellite imagery. Then we have it overhead with the smart meters data to identify where are the active households and what are the use of each one of them. And that inputs give us a better understanding and reflection of the household information in the country. This omits a long field work process. We know that household survey takes long time, long resources, and it's a very costly survey in field. So this types kind of make it more efficient and save lots of resources to the country. Moving to the next slide. Thank you. So examples of SDG indicators that would compile using the Earth observation is indicator 9.1 and 1. It's a preparation of the rural population who lives within the 2 kilometer from all the seasoned area. So we can know if we have a rural people living nearby all these areas by multiplying the different layers of data. And then we have indicator 11, which answers the question of a ratio of a land consumption rate compared to the population growth rate, and indicator 15 from the SDG, which is a mountain green cover index. Next slide, please. Okay. So we are capitalizing on the opportunities offered by the open data and the Earth observation. An example of that is the Landsat imagery of UAE and NASA night lights, where we track the growth of green and built-up areas, as well as the land consumption rate since 1972. So by using the historical landscape imagery in the UAE and the UAE, the satellite were used in the space center. So we had to use NASA lights on top of it to monitor the growth of the nightlight from 2010 onwards. So the spatial visualization capabilities help us understand the space-time factor and the historical trends that are happening in the country, and such as we were able to understand the population, the land use, the economic growth across different sectors. And we invented that, and soon we will make plans for future forecasting using different elements on the same. Next slide, please. Thank you. So in the UAE, we're trying to incorporate the geospatial data in planning the community services. Example is the health services, education, social facilities, and in a most efficient way that could have an overview and present a smart area district. With COVID hitting the country, the world all around, let me take an example of the health facility that we've developed using the GIS ground. So in that, we know that there are other applications that are public to people where they can use their Google Maps, for example, to find where is the nearest hospital. But what is different here is that the information would give you a more depth things like the bed capacity, what are the type of doctors you have in that facility, what are the things, the timings, the hours, how big is that hospital. So all that information, maybe public things cannot answer it. Can we go to the next slide? I don't see the slides appearing. Okay. So I think I will close by here, Thomas, and if you have any questions, please feel free to ask. Thank you for your time.
Okay, thank you for your presentation. Impressive work that you are doing. You've set up a state-of-the-art geospatial data environment, I think, in the UAE. So there's a lot to learn, I think, for many countries. Again, also understood that you can probably not stay with us for the full duration of this session. So yeah. I have few questions. The first one, you've shown this last example on the health facilities.
Yes.
I was wondering how this was developed and how is it used then? So is it you reaching out to the health authorities and ask them, what do you need? What are your needs? Or did you come up with these tools and then present it to them? So this co-design, is there some co-design ongoing?
So we put all those indicators that we require information in to build that infrastructure. So we looked at what are the things that might come to the user's mind and what are the information they would like to look at when they have a hospital. What are the specialists in this hospital? What is the capacity of the bed? And we looked at all the different indicators that are under the basket of health. And then we started mapping those to the hospitals. And then we get them verified by the health authority. And from there, we publish the maps.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you. And so all the geospatial analysis, also the Earth observation data analysis is done in-house by your agency.
Yes. We have the same also for the education facilities. We have the same for the different tourism attractions around the UAE. So we have different maps that we have produced, and all of these kind of give you the same detailed information. If we take a school, for example, is another example, it would tell you what type of program, what are the genders, how big is that school, how many classes in that school, and then it's the same methodology we've used, but across the different sectors.
Okay, very good, very impressive. Again, maybe to the colleagues, if you have a quick question to Her Excellence, then do it now. I don't know how long she can stay with us. If not, I think we would move to the next presentation that brings us to Yerevan, and I have the pleasure to have Shushanik Asmaria as the next presenter here with us, and she will show us some of the work that they are doing in Yerevan. Shushanik, please.
Thank you, Thomas. Thank you, dear audience. First of all, let me introduce you to myself. I'm Shushanik Asmarian. I'm presenting Armenian GEO community, National GEO community. And of course, thanks to this opportunity to be here and to talk about the experience of Armenia, how to use geospatial technologies for revealing urban environmental problems, to assess urban thermal conditions and look at their potential as guiding tools on developing urban green infrastructures. I'm a Deputy Director for Science of the Center for Ecological Noospace Studies of the National Academy of Sciences, and at the same time I'm leading the GIS and Remote Sensing Department. So I'm presenting a research institution. Next slide, please. I will start with the concept that cities are living urban ecosystems which include both human and nature in a largely human-built environmental context. They have emergent properties that cannot easily be seen by simply looking at the different functional parts of the city. Many urban areas are vulnerable to gradual environmental change, and many city dwellers are concerned with the impact of unregulated and rapid land use change. Many urban planners, managers, or designers face demands from communities and individuals for more inclusivity in planning adaptive strategies. Thus, the key challenge in the cities of the world is to devise holistic transition strategies that are flexible, adaptive, and applicable across urban regions and cities. Next slide, please. Yeah, over several decades, the pressure on urban infrastructure and the environment of the large cities of the South Caucasian region have not fully increased. This is due to numerous complex and dynamic reasons such as migration, unplanned and unregulated land use, climate change, and etc. Today, I would like to talk about the capital of Armenia, about Yerevan, which is a social-economic center of the country, where 35% of all population is concentrated, and which has been facing continuously the environmental problems for several decades. Next slide, please. The goal of the Yerevan Master Plan is the preparation of an urban development strategy for creation of favorable living conditions and provision of sustainable development. Yerevan's sprawl requires scenario of urban planning and development, with a special emphasis on recovering green infrastructures. Next slide, please. In the urban environment, green infrastructure covers everything starting from parks to street trees and green roofs to biospheres, really anything that helps absorb, delay, and treat stormwater, mitigating flooding and population downstream. So what we have for Yerevan? Slight decrease of urban areas, which shown from satellite data, and notable increase of the land surface temperature. You can look at in the left side of the slide. It was approved by the land cover maps classified again from satellite data. So regular monitoring, our group perform all these works that's shown here, and we conclude that regular monitoring is required via Earth observation, both in situ, with in situ and remote components, of course. So SENS initiated research to investigate the relationship of the land surface temperature and climatic factors using machine learning models in order to develop a method of regular monitoring of urban thermal comfort, which encompasses in situ, UAV, and satellite survey. First results are already published and can be accessed via provided link on the slide. Next slide, please. The research investigations, next slide. Yes, that's okay. The research investigations on updating the methods to monitor the thermal conditions of the urban areas still on way. By the way, we already received state funding from the State Committee of Sciences of the Ministry of Education, Science, Sport and Culture in order to continue the research, which is very crucial for Yerevan. And thanks to this project, we were able to equip with a new UAV equipped with thermal camera. Next slide, please. These investigations, next slide. No, the previous, yes. These investigations serves an excellent platform for SENS involvement in different international projects initiatives addressing urban resilience, as they provide a guiding tool where and how to recover urban green infrastructures as nature-based solutions, an excellent way towards urban sustainable development. Also an excellent tool for monitoring the effectiveness of these nature-based solutions. The Horizon 2020 Connecting Nature project was one of these initiatives aimed to position Europe as a global leader in the innovation and implementation of nature-based solutions, and where SENS was included as a main driver on advertising the importance of nature-based solutions in the Caucasian region. By the way, from Caucasian region, another GIS and remote sensing consulting center called Geographic was also included. And in particular in Armenia and Georgia as a pioneer on implementing nature-based solutions in Caucasian urban hub for Yerevan and Tbilisi. Next slide, please. The role of SENS in this project, of course, was extended, not only on research component, but also on developing and implementing an event towards recovering a small piece of green infrastructure, NBS called Green Wool for Kindergartens, which in fact diversified SENS activities as a research center. So what we have created in order to see what we received in the result, I offer to watch the small and short video. Thank you. Can we go back to my last slide? Just to overview and to shortly talk about our next steps. Next slide, please. Yeah. So what we're planning as a next steps, plans towards to provide remote sensing data and technologies as tools for monitoring urban thermal conditions for public administration and for urban planning policies. To develop indicators to assess impact of the implemented nature-based solutions, in particular green wall for kindergartens. Of course, we are going to try to attract other Caucasian cities and towns to think about nature-based solutions as a way and tool of building urban resilience. And we also do hope, with our experience in Armenia, to support the urban resilience engagement plan of GEO. Thank you. If there are any questions, I'm ready to answer.
Thank you, Shushanek. Let's say now I don't let you go, neither Cascade or Nazmul. So I force you to stay. So we continue with the presentations, and we take questions to your slides then during the panel discussion, if that is okay. So with that, I would then move now from the city perspective to the more global perspective of heat exposure, and give the floor to Cascade Walls.
Thank you, Thomas, and thank you everyone for being here. I'm really excited to present this work and to have a discussion and hear all your questions. So my name is Cascade Jaholski. I'm a postdoctoral research scientist at the Center for International Earth Science Information Network at the New Columbia Climate School. Broadly, I'm a human environmental geographer, and my research has largely actually focused on urban food security. And more recently, I've been thinking about what are direct pathways climate change can affect urban food security. And I'll talk about that in a little bit as I go through this new data set we've developed here at Season with our partners at UC Santa Barbara. I am co-chair of the GEO Health Community Practice Small Working Group on Heat with Dr. Ben Zaitchik at Johns Hopkins University, and I invite anyone on this call to join the GEO Health Community of Practice. There, I think, are 4 or 5 different working groups on various aspects of how we can use Earth observations to inform public health policy and practice. And it's really just, they're wonderful meetings and really informative to develop collaborations, not just among academics, but also practitioners and the private sector. Next slide, please. So in North America this summer, specifically in the Pacific Northwest, we learned, I would say the hard way, of how dangerous extreme heat can be among urban settlements or urban residents. The impacts of extreme heat range from mortality, as we saw in Seattle, Portland, and the Northwest, all the way to in vitro impacts on fetuses, maternal child health, labor outcomes, infrastructure can be damaged. Really, extreme heat can manifest in many different ways. And for me, as somebody who studies urban food security, I'm really interested in the connection between extreme heat and labor output. Because as our cities approach temperatures that are ubiquitously hot and humid, I think that we may have impacts on people's ability to procure food, because almost across all urban settlements that I know of, the vast majority of people secure their food through working, and many people in informal settlements work outside in conditions without access to shade, water, and air conditioning. Next slide, please. However, for much of the planet's urban settlements, we do not have a robust longitudinal weather station record. So the map on the right is roughly where urban settlements are in green, and urban weather stations for Southern Asia. So in India, there are about 3,000 urban settlements across India, and only 111 of them have a robust weather station network. So weather stations tend to be the kind of gold standard for measuring 2-meter air temperature and humidity to identify heat health impacts. And for much of the planet, we estimated in a recent paper that about 4 billion people live greater than 25 kilometers away from a weather station. So Earth observation data is imperative for filling this gap. But I want to emphasize that we need both weather stations and satellites in the sky to really model high-resolution heat health impacts across the planet, specifically in urban areas. Next slide, please. So for this data set that CSIN and NASA CDAC just released last week, it's a global high-resolution daily extreme heat exposure data set. In the data set for approximately 13,000 urban settlements on the planet, we have every heat wave from 1983 to 2016 defined across several different metrics. And how we built this data set is we use a new temperature data product built by UC Santa Barbara called Church Daily, which is a very high resolution, about 5 kilometers at the equator, daily maximum air temperature and relative humidity product. And there really is no other product built to date. And the exciting part about the Church Daily methodology is it will be operationalized for both seasonal or subseasonal, seasonal, and regular weather forecasting at a very high spatial resolution, and then updated in near real time. Right now, the record only goes through 2016. And then we relied on another important Earth observation data set, the Global Human Settlement Layer Urban Centers database, which maps population and urban extents for about 13,000 cities, benchmarking population at 1975, 1990, 2000, and 2015. And so for this, we blended the two data sets. We essentially took the polygons or the outline of a city, and we came up with a daily area average temperature. We could also redo the data set for a couple of different metrics to look at how heat varies within an urban settlement. But for now, we're just looking at the daily average for each urban settlement across the planet. And then we intersect that data set with the population exposed. So we have a record for the whole planet for all of these urban settlements of not just how long, how hot, and how frequent heat waves are happening, but also how many people are being exposed. And then for each of those settlements, whether exposure is going up because population is increasing or because temperature and humidity combinations are increasing. Next slide, please. So this is a little more complex. I'm not going to go into too many details here, but the idea is we use for the initial data set, we have 5 different heat health metrics. We approximate wet bulb globe temperature, which is, again, a metric that incorporates both humidity, temperature, also radiated heat and wind speeds. And we benchmark it we threshold it at 3 different criteria, 28C, 30C, and 32C, which are based off the International Standard Organization's heat health or occupational heat health standards. We also have the U.S. National Weather Service's thresholds for extreme heat events, which are 2-day or longer periods where the heat index exceeds 40.6C, or 1-day or longer events where the heat index exceeds 40.1C. And the reason we have so many different metrics for folks to use with this data set is that both in terms of policy, heat health standards can vary based on different jurisdictions, but also in terms of populations. There are thresholds that the human body can tolerate that are ubiquitous across geographies, but because of acclimation, different physical infrastructure, heat health impacts can vary across populations. So we wanted to produce as diverse data set as possible for practitioners to understand how extreme heat exposure in cities is changing locally. Next slide, please. So we just published a paper that is publicly available through the Proceedings of the National Academy of Science. And I'm not going to go into the details of the results there, but for those of you who really want to understand the methods in more detail or the analysis, global analysis of this data set, but what we've found is that extreme heat exposure increased about 200% from 1983 to 2016 globally. So extreme heat exposure tripled. And because we resolve it for each city on the planet, we can really dive into the spatial heterogeneity of how these patterns of exposure change across different geographies. Next slide, please. So right here we have three bar charts of the number of wet bulb globe temperature days that, the number of days where wet bulb globe temperature exceeds 30 C from 1983 to 2016 for three very large cities in Southern Asia. And this is just the days per year. And you'll see that the number of days per year where wet bulb globe temperature exceeds 30 degrees is growing across all three cities. However, the rate of change is pretty spatially heterogeneous, with Kolkata warming much faster than Delhi and Dhaka. Now, the next extension of this research and this data set is to ask the question, well, how much is climate change contributing to this warming versus the urban heat island effect, or how much we are altering the urban environment to create this warming? Because that really goes back to the previous presentation, is I think the solution space for these problems is bottom up. And we can understand how the urban morphology and climate are interacting, but really what policies we can implement to reduce extreme heat exposure, especially among those most vulnerable. Next slide, please. So this data set is available on NASA CDAC. You can just type in urban heat to the search bar rather than dealing with this DOI, but the DOI is stable. So this whole data set is publicly available. The code is in Python. The data is in CSV, GeoJSON, and shapefiles. I'm more than happy to help anyone walk through this data set. I'm in the process of starting to build some tutorials, so it's more user-friendly. And the next natural extension is to extend the analysis beyond just urban areas, but look at how these patterns are changing across the whole urban-rural continuum, and then really move into the forecast space for early warning systems. Next slide, please. Thank you so much for your for the time to present. Please again send me an email with any questions you may have. Happy to help people as I am able, and I really look forward to your questions during the Q&A session. So thank you.
Okay, thank you, Cascade. Very nice presentation. Nice to see that you've used also our data, so that's good to see. Now, after having had two more scientific presentations making use of Earth observation data, we are moving to the last presentation, which is coming from Nazmul Hook from ICLAI, which is a city organization, and he can present it much better than I can do it now. But that is very important, because we can do as much science as we want if this is not picked up by the cities in the end, because we learned also from Graham in his opening presentation that the most important thing in the new urban agenda is to put the cities at the center. So the cities are governed by the mayors, and they have to pick up a lot of this knowledge that we are creating on the scientific side. And I think ICLAI is one of the organizations that is actually trying to help in that respect. So, Nazmul, I'm handing over to you.
Thank you, Thomas, and good morning, good afternoon, and also in some places of the world it is already good evening. So I'm very much pleased to join here, and especially I'm very much delighted, and I would say I have greatly enlightened by the set of presentations that I have already seen from varieties of actors coming from United Nations, UN Habitat, and also from the academia and practice side, and which is quite engaging and encompassing, I would say. And you have also rightly pointed out that it is also important that we, being an urban stakeholder, how we are picking up the state of the art or cutting edge research and knowledge that are coming out from different sources. So we have the kind of onus of being a broker between academia and the communities and local government. So it is also for us very important that we have the correct level of understanding from the updated knowledge, and that we are incorporating and integrating essentially into our work stream and work philosophies. So I will be very happy to touch upon some of the activities that we have been doing and how we can establish a solid link and between our work and the immense potentialities of Earth observation that is providing. A brief introduction about myself. I'm Nazmul Haq. I'm from Bangladesh, and currently I am leading the Resilient Development Program of ICLEI World Secretariat. So ICLEI is one of the, if not the biggest, but among one of the biggest city and local government network organizations of the world. We have more than 2,500 member cities, towns, and regions as our member. So as you see in this slide that we have 2,500 local government and regional organizations, and we are also active in 125 plus countries. Just to let you know that who is our major entry points, our major counterparts. We basically working with the city, towns, and regional governments. Our main stakeholder groups, of course, the vulnerable communities. However, we see the local governments are the essential representatives of the vulnerable communities and the cities. So therefore, our main counterpart at the subnational level are the local governments. And also we have our active presence through our different offices in 26 regions and countries of the world. Next slide, please. So ICLEI, as I said, we are working and we are very active with the local government, be it is city level, be it national, subnational level, or regional, or very much rural level. So that is why we also our working strategy has two dimensions. From the ICLEI World Secretariat and other regional secretariats, we are diffusing different programmatic activities, but how we are essentially connecting with the local government. So that is why political partnership with the local government is very much essential in our working approach. And you see that here I basically working with two co-chairs who are the political representative of ICLEI Resilient Development and Risk Management portfolios. These co-chairs or this portfolio are politically represented by Honorable Mayor of Quilimani City of Mozambique, Mayor Manuel de Araujo, and also member of Legislative Assembly in Delhi, Ms. Atishi Marlena. And I also have another state minister from state of Malacca as our advisor. So these persons are political advisors, and through them we are also connecting with other political leaderships across different hierarchies. It can be local level, it can be subnational level, it can be regional level, and also sometime at national level. So they are very much important instruments and important messenger for our work. Next slide, please. So this is what, from ICLEI perspective, our sustainable development philosophy. So in a nutshell, we are very much in tune with all the speakers who presented earlier, that sustainable development should be an integrated approach. No, it should not be siloed. So that's why from ICLEI perspective, we always communicate the vision and message that sustainable development will only happen when there is low emission development, when the development is nature-based, when development is equitable and people-centered, when development is resilient, and development is also circular. So that is why we see that development is encompassing and development is integrating different views, different activities, and different parts of the society who are seemingly seems disconnected, but for a sustainable view, we need to incorporate them under a common thread. And that is where I am now entering into the discussion how we are connecting or we are working with the local and city government regions, city governments for a sustainable vision. So let me also have a brief reflection on what we have achieved from COP27, recently concluded COP27, and what's the implication of the outcomes of COP27 on the rapidly rising, rapidly growing cities and urban areas, especially in the global south, which are basically the global epicenter of economic activities, but at the same time, global epicenter of vulnerabilities. So that is why we see from the COP27, we have, there is a kind of frustrating outcome for the rapidly rising urban centers in the global south. They do not have any breakthrough commitment received from the national governments who negotiated over the 2 weeks, but at the same time, they also did not have any fair commitment of climate finance, which is very much necessary to not only to address their risk and vulnerability, but also to raise their capacity development at local level, which is very much essential to translate all the GEO related activities, all the state-of-the-art data transmission related activities to be activated at ground level. So there is, from that perspective, there is kind of frustrating outcomes, and that is where the organizations like ICLEI is providing some kind of influential and brokering role to bring all these different partnerships together to make those cities workable, livable, and resilient. So can we go to the next slide, please? Despite all the frustration coming out from international negotiation space, should we stop working our journey? Should we stop dreaming how to make our communities resilient? No. When states fail, national governments or international commitments fail, the cities, urban areas, regional areas, and their local governments take the responsibility on their shoulder, and they are showing some kind of beacons of hope. By which way? Different ways. First, promoting integrated action. Secondly, promoting multi-level actions. Thirdly, by promoting advanced level of reporting and data management, data analysis, and showing where the demands are for capacity development. And fourthly, by allowing financial flows or by enabling financial flows from different sources which are not always possible under the general national level agreement. So from ICLEI, we always try to support the local governments, city governments, national governments from different perspectives which can effectively meet the 4 points that I have mentioned: integrated action, multi-level action, data and reporting, as well as capacity building supports and financial supports. So as you see, what we are providing to subnational level governments, like we assist them by guide planning actions and access to finance. We support them through conducting research and drive innovation. We support them by showcasing actions that they are doing at the ground level to the next level, and also scaling up those actions, the best practices and actions and practices to the other peers who might be in the other side of the world. But essentially, we are transferring the knowledge from one region to another, as long as they are good practice, as long as they are achieving us to continue our journey for sustainable development. And finally, we encourage them, we support them to undertake ambitious climate action, which is very much necessary for varieties of reasons. the many cities, many local governments across the world, they are kind of afraid to take ambitious action because sometimes they see they do not have enough funding. Sometimes they see they do not have enough support from different levels. But we from ICLEI or other city and regional organizations, we encourage them, please go ahead, prepare your ambitious action which will drastically reduce your emission level, which is drastically increase the resilience of your cities. Next slide, please. So as I see, just for example, what are the different support offered that we are providing for the cities? We have a set of tools, we have set of frameworks, we have set of programs that are tailored to the different cities depending on their capacities and needs. We have a Green Climate Cities program to provide guidance and capacity buildings, and also to understand cities where they are. It provides them a diagnostic tool to understand their capacities and what further actions and capacity buildings they might require for undertaking climate actions. We also have a science-based targets tools by which cities can undertake science-based targets, what level of GHG emission targets they should achieve at the local level, which can contribute to achieve the nationally determined contribution for national and to meet national and international targets. We also have a very strong reporting system that we have developed with several other organizations, which I will be talking in a moment later. And also we have a program which provides cities access to finance that is called Transformative Action Program. So we capacitate cities in a way so that they can develop bankable projects for climate action, and they can also access to finance from different sources. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned, one of our main frameworks is we call a Green Climate Cities or GCC framework, by which city can understand where they are by analyzing their strength, and then what actions they need to do, which we called ACT, and then how they should accelerate their actions and promoting their actions across different regions and different continents and different countries, which we called accelerate. So this is our main framework for cities to provide a guidance what they should do and what actions they might require for undertaking climate actions. And we have a project with UN Habitat, which is called Urban Led, and we have dozens of cities under the Urban Led. They adopted this framework, and they prepared their climate action planning and climate resilient planning based on this Green Climate Cities framework. And we'll be happy to share the findings of the project if anybody is interested. Next slide, please. So the second part, I'm skipping our multi-level action part, which is also very much integral to our philosophy. But now I'm focusing on the data part, which is very much heart of this session. So relevance of data for local government. Am I towards the end of my time? I don't hear you. Perhaps you need to unmute yourself. Thomas, could you please unmute?
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I hope the slides are coming back. Yes.
Okay. Sorry for the interruption. No worries. So yes, I'll be brief here. That we also have a very robust program of reporting. So, and that reporting is basically rooted in data, because what we feel that all the countries, be it for adaptation and be it for mitigation, they provided some kind of reporting to UNFCCC and other international bodies to communicate their adaptation target, and also to communicate their nationally determined contribution in terms of GHG and all other gases. However, there is a very strong data gaps presence at the local level, and where exactly we are working. So we are working across 2,500 member cities, and with our other partner organizations, we have more than 10,000 cities under our coverage. And we encourage and we train and encourage local governments how to report GHG emission data, how to create GHG inventories, as well as how to report their risk and vulnerabilities data. So when we gathered this data from CDP ICLEI Unified Reporting System, we have a very robust understanding what is their local level emission, what are the local level data needs, what are the local level vulnerabilities and risk, and that local level can communicate to the national level, so that national level policymakers and national level data can be robust and they can have a clear idea where currently we need to intervene and how we should prepare our overall national planning, so that our robust data reporting system provided a very basic impetus for the and a very basic and very fundamental inputs to the national and international communities about what is happening at the local level. So next slide, please. Yes, so you see a glimpse of data that we are collecting, especially on the climate risk and hazards. So it's a series of, we are collecting data points on several vulnerabilities, several risks, and several natural hazards, including precipitation, storm and wind, extreme hot temperature like wildfire, water scarcity, biological hazards, chemical change, flood and sea level rise. So we are collecting data on so many data points. And secondly, the next slide, I will also show how this data, which I already explained, is communicating from local level to national level, and it helps us to coordinate vertical integration across different governance level. So by collecting local level data, we provide the necessary recognition of local level activities, local economic activities, and the importance of local level data. We connect the local level data to national level data. These data give us a essential comparison between different cities, different countries, and different communities. And then finally, this helps us to vertically helps us to plan better and report better to the international communities. Next slide, please. So this is not an important slide. This is just how we are achieving our targets, and we are assisting cities, subnational government, national government, and regional government to plan to have more risk-informed planning or more informed climate action planning, and to undertake ambitious climate action planning based on the data that we are collecting. And that is where we also see a lot of synergies that we can establish with the organizations like UN Habitat, organizations like European Space Agency, DLR, or other academia, because I see my previous speaker, they did a very nice study on heat wave. And that is exact information that we also need from the different communities, so that we can also essentially capacitate, essentially empower the local government that is what is happening. That's kind of information that you also need to know to prepare your adaptation and resilience plan more robust, more communicative, and more participatory. So I am stopping here, but with a note that we need to work very collaboratively. We need to work on very integrated way, so that we all can learn from each other, and we can help each other to make our communities and societies more safer and more resilient. Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you very much, Nazmul, for this detailed overview of all the different activities you are also doing in ICLEI, which go much beyond lobbying of trying to connect city mayors with other stakeholders. So that's very important to see. Let me take this opportunity also to welcome Evangelos Gerazopoulos, that many of you know. He was moderating the previous session, and he's one of the fathers of the resilient cities and human settlements engagement priority work. So I'm very glad that he could join here. He's research director at the Institute for Environmental Research at the National Observatory of Athens in Greece. welcome, Evangelos. Maybe a very quick question to you, because at least the panelists here had to go out of the plenary session. Did the plenary accept the proposal, or are we talking about nothing in the end?
Well, with all those examples, nice examples that have been presented also in this session about the works that are being done, I mean, it would make no sense that we don't approve the fourth engagement priorities. So yes, indeed, resilient cities and the human settlements, so something a little bit broader than just the cities and the urban web, has been approved. So it's taking equal position to the other three policy priorities that we have in GEO: climate change, disaster risk reduction, and sustainable development goals. And the particularity is that it intersects through all the policy frames, and it needs to tackle with the complexities that the cities are having inherently. So very glad also to be with you.
Yeah, good. Thank you, Evangelos. So we have a good 20 minutes now to discuss with you and receive also questions, comments from the audience. Before we embark in a bit wider discussion on what do we want to do with this new engagement priority, and what are maybe also the problems we are facing here, I would take a few minutes to still come back to the presentations we heard earlier, because there's a few questions directly addressing the presenters. There's one from Michelle Spicer to Cascade, who's asking if the growth in area of urban centers is taken into account in the data set.
That's a fantastic question. My understanding on the Global Human Settlement Layer Urban Center database is the boundaries are fixed at 2016. However, with those boundaries, you could quite easily, and this is something we're looking at doing, is bring in different land cover, higher resolution land cover maps to see how the urban morphology, if you will, or urban land cover classes have changed within those boundaries. Our data set just uses the 2015 boundaries, but we do account for the population change. But yeah, that's a really important question.
Good, thank you, Cascade. Then there's one just coming in from Orestes related to the work of ICLEI in collecting data set and information. And I can read it. Does ICLEI propose to its city-specific global data sets and tools offered by the GEO community? For example, the Urban Center database that Cascade mentioned earlier would make a global comparison more coherent. Nazmul, can you comment on that?
That is also, again, a very important and very excellent question, I would say. And that is where we always say that the partnership is very much important. And the world is very much diverse and very much unequal. And we as ICLEI, we do not have the capacities always to use of the state-of-the-art GEO technologies, but we know that how immensely these technologies and this data set can be beneficial for cities and local governments to develop their resilience and planning process. So that is where, wherever possible, for example, in European cities or the North American cities who are mostly developed and have better accessibility to all this data. Of course, we are always proposing and we are always trying to use all these data sets for climate action planning or city sustainable action and planning. But when considering the global south and many of the global southern cities, they do not have the capacities. What would be our approach? So in that case, yes, Thomas, you are also part of developing the global spatial data layers. For example, Cascade, you have the very detailed data set or the from the NASA or from the other organizations. We have the biggest global data set, which can be very much instrumental to risk-informed planning or to informed planning for sustainable development, not only for today, but also for next 50, 60, 70, 80 years of projections. So that is where we need to come together and work together how efficiently we can use the data that currently we'll have and what kind of capacity development we can offer to the city officials, especially for the global south. because the officials of the Global South, it is not that they do not have the capacity, and very often they do not have the financial means, because although we know that many of the data sets are freely available, but it requires some kind of infrastructure or investment in many places. So that is where I always see that we need to, this discussion opens up the space of bigger collaboration, and we need to work on that collaboration, how we can make it happen. But to be very precise on that question from Spear, that yes, as much as possible, we refer our cities to use the updated global data set, not only from our CDP unified data system, but also from the standard data procedure like European Space Agency data or NASA data or other data wherever possible. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Nazmul. Maybe a follow-up question also from my side related to your slides. You were mentioning a lot of parameters that you are reporting, so hazard information, climate information. Are you collecting this really for all your member cities, or is it some of them are reporting, others not? What is the status there?
Well, this is a reporting system that have been running for last 6 or 7 years, and with the organization called CDP, Carbon Disclosure Program. So with them we have been running, and mainly our target group is all the local governments, but we cannot, I must acknowledge, we cannot reach all the cities of the world. So that's why our member cities, they firstly receive the questionnaire. We have a detailed questionnaire, and we update every year, and we distribute the questionnaire among our member cities. But at the same time, we try to use all the partners who are with whom we are working very closely, use their networks also to reach the other cities who are not basically our member cities as of now. So these data collection, in a nutshell, not limited within our member cities, but from our side, the data we collect from our member cities, and our other organizations, they collect from their member cities.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Let me maybe also get back to Shushanik on her presentation. She was presenting the work of land surface temperature, green spaces, etc. in Yerevan. And my question to her would be, in how far she was able also to communicate this information to the city planners. So was this information picked up? Is it used? You had this example of the green walls for the kindergartens. Maybe you can elaborate on that a little bit. You are muted.
Yeah, thank you. Sorry. Thank you for a good question. Yes, for sure, our strategy is to try to keep the negotiation with the local authorities. We are working in close cooperation with Yerevan municipality in order to have, first of all, to have this first example of very cost-effective nature-based solution to be replicated for different problematic kindergartens in Yerevan, and not only Yerevan, but also for the kindergartens in different other cities and towns in Armenia. But also, it is very important to have this strategy of developing remote sensing methods in order to assess the urban comfort and keep this information and give this information, to reach this information to the decision makers in local authorities is another strategy. And we are keeping the way to work with them in order to provide some guidance and where and how to improve, to recover the green infrastructure to make urban environment more environmentally friendly. Yeah, because otherwise, reducing green spaces, we will have very very really bad situation in Yerevan with worsened heat island effects.
Thank you. No, because this is of course very relevant, and I think one of the key points of this new engagement priority that we have to assure that the work that we are doing in the many different activities within GEOs, that this is transferred the knowledge to the city level then. I also see now a question coming in the chat dedicated to you. Maybe you can also answer that. Where one could find nature-based solutions you nicely described. Is there a global resource where one could find such solutions to replicate?
Great, thank you very much. Of course, there is a platform, OPLA. I will put the link on the chat. It is a great market of nature-based solutions, which was developed and provided in frames of Horizon 2020 Connecting Nature project. That was really, this is an amazing place when you can look for and find appropriate nature-based solutions, and also you will be able to put your examples in this platform in order to disseminate the event and to make it more broadly known, in the world. So you can just check. And of course, our case is also described there with the details on developing, on financing, or you can find there many details on that.
Okay. So, thanks a lot. So if you have a link, maybe you can share it also in the chat for the others.
Absolutely, perfect. Yes.
Good. No, there was still one open question also from Tom de Groove, who was saying that by 2060 we expect the world's building stock to double. That means a lot of emission with all the concrete that is needed to build, and a lot of disaster risk if we build those buildings in the wrong places. Can Earth observation anticipate where this will still happen? I have an answer to this, but maybe Cascade or Evangelos want to come in, or also Shushanik. Please just go ahead.
Sorry, I was just putting.
No problem. Maybe then I can also start because it links a bit also to what Nazmul just was referring to. That one thing is to do the monitoring and to follow what's going on at the moment in the environment, but especially for the urban planning, national planning, we need to look forward. What is the situation 2030? What's the situation 2060? And this is something where I see the Earth observation community only starting to come up with now. So here at the JRC, we are using the global human settlement layer, the time series that we have from 1970 and until today, to also start extrapolating and projecting into the future. So this is a way that we can do. But I think we are only really at the beginning here, and we have to really enhance our capacities in this projection work and do this also as a spatial detail that is really useful also at the city level. So if we provide only national projections of how much built up there will be in the future, this is not enough. We have to really be able to answer at the city level, how much will Lagos grow spatially, and in which direction this growth will go in a certain direction. I don't know if anybody else of the panelists wants to also come into this question. Cascade, please.
Yeah, I think I posted it in the Q&A, but I was not involved in the data set, and I'll put it in the chat. My apologies for that, but there's CDAC just released a new 1/8 degree urban land extension projection up to 2100 based on the SSPs. And my understanding of my limited understanding of the model development is that Earth observations were key to constructing a projected data set like this. So I'll put it in the chat so it's not
Okay.
written.
Good. Good. Thank you. So we are already getting a bit close to the end, and I would try to not go much over time, but I would like to reflect a bit on the discussions and the comments we had during today, and then ask also all of you for a last comment on that. So what I'm taking away really here is that although we've been talking a lot about urban areas, I think this engagement priority really wants to cover the full urban-rural continuum. So this was mentioned also by Cascade. He started now with the urban areas, but there's a strong need also to go to the smaller settlements, to the towns, and eventually the rural population to make sure they also receive information. Then on Shushanik's side, you mentioned the needs, and partly also Cascade, the need for not only Earth observation satellite data. We need also there again a full spectrum. So we need in situ data, UAV, airborne data to really cover a lot of domains to be able to answer then the question needed really at the local level. And one last thing I also think that is important if we want to achieve our goal of connecting with the cities, we need easy messages. So we sometimes have the problem that we are in our scientific domain so much enclosed and think everybody understands all the parameters and complex equations that we are working with. We really need to boil this down into some information that can then be absorbed also at the city level. So that is really what I think this engagement priority has to work on, that we are able really to bridge the gap between science and policy at national, but also at the local level eventually. And I would like, Evangelos, please come in.
Yeah, may I follow up to the last point that you mentioned, which is very essential and crucial. So this goes mainly to Nazmul. As Thomas said, the previous session was dedicated to this science policy interfaces. So we are producing a lot of research outcomes, but at the end of the day, we might be failing to advocate and communicate them to the right stakeholders and institutions like ICLEI. And from your presentation, it's clear, seem to be key in this process. So what tools and means do you think we should be preparing to enable your work convey all these messages about the usefulness of Earth observation to cities? Or maybe it's frozen.
Yeah, I think we have he lost
having some
connection.
problems. Yeah, he got at some point.
Nazmul, you're
Okay.
back. Did you hear the question of Evangelos? I see a problem in connection. So let's maybe for wrapping up slowly, ask my last question to all of you, because I would like to reflect to you about the key priorities that you see for GEO in this fourth engagement priority. So is it more on the data side? So do we need to have more data, better data? Do we need to have more scientific development, or do we need more tools that others can use to work on it? And then lastly, the capacity building. So where would you see really the focus of the activities in this new engagement priority?
May I start?
Yes, please.
I think we should bear in mind all the components you count. So we really need the digestion of the concept of urban resilience. We need to digest the concept of nature-based solutions, And of course, we need to disseminate much more these concepts in all over the world and GEO community, and the importance of Earth observation for in this very important nexus. So capacity building also very important. So all you mentioned is important to be engaged and encompassed. You are muted.
Sorry, Cascade, do you want to come in?
Yeah, I echo a similar point. As an early career scientist who's had the fortune of working with stakeholders and practitioners in some contexts, but not in others, that groups like GEO and the GEO Secretariat are really an excellent conduit. I learned so much with each one of these webinars, or hopefully someday in-person meetings, by connecting just with people across the gambit of users of Earth observation tools. And the more I love to do global scale research as a scientist, because I think it's a fun problem, but the more I do it, the more I realize how important the solution space is bottom up. And just, I mean, the green walls were just an excellent example of how Earth observations can be tied to local community development. And as a scientist, I can't work with every community, but I can work with some. And I think younger scientists today really understand how important that is, and are really encouraged to work with stakeholders and communities, no matter what scale of research we do. And I look forward to doing more of that. So thank you.
Thank you. Good. Evangelos, your takeaway?
Yeah. So I also echo to Susanik's position and agree with Cascade. So I think we should put much emphasis on understanding the actual needs of the cities, and also to develop common language and common tools so that we are able to advocate on the use of Earth observation to the cities. The technologies are out there. There are many applications already. Maybe sometimes when listening more carefully to the needs, we need to adapt some of those solutions. And as soon as we have this, and we develop also the channels to push all this information towards the cities like iClay and other networks, then I think we are already making good progress in this.
Thank you. Nazmul, are you back connected?
I hope I'm connected. My apologies for.
Good. Yeah. So we Evangelos
Yeah,
had
it's been quite a while that we have in general in Germany we have been experiencing. Yeah, but impact on.
Okay, Evangelos, do you want to get back to Nazmul with your question?
If he's still with us, I think he's having problem. Maybe we put him in.
Maybe we follow up in view also of time. Maybe I think I would close this this session here. I would also, Amos, if you could bring up the last slide, because there's still more urban discussion coming up during today. So there's at 5, unfortunately, 2 parallel events. There's the Human Planet Initiative and the EO for SDG Toolkit presenting their activities. So I know it's a hard choice, but there I think the discussion that we are having now will continue. So with that, I would like to thank a lot the presenters, panelists here for this discussion. It's in the end, it's always too little time for discussion, but it's only a start. So now we have this force engagement priority, and I'm sure that we will have many more occasions for discussing urban and settlement related topics in the frame of GEO. And with that, thank you very much for being with us. Thank you also for the audience for the active discussions in the chat and in the question and answers.
Thank you.
Hope to see you soon. Bye bye.
Thank you. Bye.